I remember every day that I went to school, I'd look forward to one thing the most. I'd desperately stare at the clock, so frequently that time seemed to flow painfully slow. Once I'd get home, I'd throw my school bag without even realizing I did, and without changing my uniform, I'd gaze at the TV screen like there would be no tomorrow. Then came the time to sleep, which I dreaded the most, where I'd sometimes still be in my uniform, playing video games. I miss those days, the simplicity and sheer joy of gaming that I'll never experience again. I'd find myself thinking, will I still be playing video games when I'm older? Here I am, still playing them. But I think as a child what I was really asking myself was, will video games still hold the same weight in my life as they do now? It hurts to say, but they no longer do. Having lost pretty much my only form of escapism at the time, I was left confused and frustrated. Immediately I went and searched for it as if it was some lost gift. In a sense, it was. It was the gift that kept giving, now no longer answering my call. Slowly over the years I made peace, accepting it was likely a phase that had now passed. Which got me thinking, what happened? Why had the thing I enjoyed doing the most become so dull? Finding the answer wasn't difficult, but it isn't as one-dimensional as I originally thought. Saying you've grown out of them wasn't going to cut it. What I have described is referred to as gaming fatigue. First of all, let's quickly define what gaming fatigue is. The feeling of mental, physical or emotional exhaustion from playing video games, similarly as you may feel from a profession. This can be brought up by repeatedly completing similar tasks, finding games lackluster, or even by investing many hours in hopes of building a career in the industry. For me, it was the feeling of experiencing the same thing. So, I decided to visit a different genre entirely. Trying to break out of my comfort bubble of open world, JRPGs and story-driven cinematic games was not easy. Nonetheless, I decided to visit the genre I had avoided the most, horror. At that time, Resident Evil Village's release date was creeping up on me, so I thought there would be no perfect time than now to dive in. In preparation for RE Village, I played the maiden demo, watched lore videos, and even read up on fan theories on Reddit. First time in a while, dare I say, I felt excited. I dropped into the gothic-inspired supernatural world, surrounded by all manner of threat that Capcom had created. Then within an hour or so, I was back at that all too familiar feeling of emptiness. Just to make it clear, RE Village was a good game. A well-realized world, some enjoyable boss fights, and importantly for me, the uneasy feeling of constant threat lurking. But merely good just doesn't cut it for me anymore. I can look back to the dawn of video games for me. There was no game that I played that felt too familiar. Granted, you can make the argument that as a child I likely didn't have a critical or technical view of games. Anything that promoted a dopamine response was good enough. While once I began studying games development, games didn't please me as much as they once did because of a now mostly objective view of what makes one good. This undeniably has contributed to how I look at games differently now, but I still wouldn't crown it the root cause. So, I'm going to make a bold statement. I firmly believe games don't innovate the same way that they used to back in the day. There, I said it. I'm not talking about graphics, world scale, or story depth, rather the design side. I keep seeing developers playing it too safe, basing their game on the foundation of an overdone design concept. I'm not attacking those developers, definitely not. All I'm saying is, in my opinion, those games are still good, but don't necessarily bring something new to the table. I just wish they took more risks. You know, with the recent release of Elden Ring, and with it getting a majority perfect score, it made me curious, what other games were in that conversation? I visited IGN, GamesRadar, Metacritic, and GameSpot to see what they crowned as masterpieces. Yes, I know you could argue, reviews are subjective, however, generally I see gamers agreeing on what critics consider to be worthy of a perfect score and or consider to be a masterpiece, more so than games that aren't reviewed to be either. For example, both critics and players would mostly agree Breath of the Wild deserved the perfect score it got. Let me emphasize, generally agree, not always. There are games both you and I could think of that we believe shouldn't have got perfect scores or be considered masterpieces. Anyway, I immediately saw a pattern with games that were getting perfect scores. One of the reasons, say, God of War 2018 or Elden Ring got an overall perfect score is because there's quite literally no other game that could capture the same essence. On top of that, it's the perfect example of when developers not only push the innovation wheels, but in doing so create an unbelievably fun game. Though innovation doesn't always equate to a masterpiece. Death Stranding is objectively an innovative game. Before it was released, there were pretty much no games on the market that did what DS did. For example, I hadn't played a game that had this level of depth just for traversing on foot. But the reception was mixed. In a nutshell, I'm saying an innovative game doesn't always mean mind-blowing success. At its heart, it's a game, and so it must be fun. Considering what makes a game fun varies from player to player, innovating makes an already nightmarish task near impossible. That being said, I know why developers aren't taking such a risk, because on the other side of the spectrum, if your game fails to innovate, there's a higher chance it'll do worse than if it was based on a pre-existing successful concept. So what's the takeaway from this video? Well, it's clear video games no longer hold the same weight in my life as they once did, and they may not for you either. While it can be frustrating or even heartbreaking to stop something that once brought you so much joy, I believe that's okay. I began to realize video games are no different to other things in life. Maybe you used to play a sport, or part of a choir, used to skate, or whatever the hobby, chances are you gradually began to depart from it, well, when the joy departed. Why would you invest time into a hobby which doesn't bring you joy, even if it once did? In my case, I still occasionally enjoy video games, mostly games that have something new to offer. But importantly, I'm no longer in a desperate search of how video games once used to make me feel. I'm happy and content with that, and have found other hobbies in life. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Please feel free to leave any thoughts in the comments below, where I'd love to talk to you guys. Take care.